Hello, my friends. It's Monday, February 23rd, 2026, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee. And welcome to the Radical Russ Show, the home for pothead political punditry, coming to you from Rolla J Studios in Southern Oregon. On this week's Smoke Session, let's talk about new laws being proposed in New Jersey and Oregon with great backronyms. We'll also take a look at the Democratic autopsy on why Harris lost support over the Biden administration's support for genocide in Gaza, plus a look at the Democratic primary in Texas, Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico, and a look at the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, and his mistaken idea on how to move forward in America. Also, more from the minority leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, over the current partial government shutdown on DHS and how he just can't get around the idea of abolishing ICE. But before we get to all the serious political stuff, we've got time for 3 quick hits.
Still loose, 11 seconds, you've got 10 seconds, the countdown going on right now, Morrow, up to Schultz, 5 seconds left in the game, you believe in miracles? Yes!
Well, I want to say congratulations to the United States men's and women's Olympic hockey teams. For the first time in history, both men's and women's teams have won the Olympic gold in the same Olympic Games. The men's, the first time since the Miracle on Ice in 1980, which I remember watching live as a kid. That's how old I am. But of course, we couldn't enjoy this thing without the Trump regime somehow ruining it. And of course, you've probably seen by now the video of FBI Director Kash Patel in a boy's size large hockey jersey celebrating with the U.S. hockey team in their locker room, popping champagne, chugging beers, because apparently, you know, the Epstein files have already been taken care of and all the criminals have been locked up and all the crimes have been solved. So Cash can go flying around on taxpayers' dime on our U.S. government jet to go party in Italy. Boy, that just sounds awful. You know, an FBI director spending that kind of money. Doesn't that sound terrible, Cash?
I'm just saying Chris Wray doesn't need a government-funded G5 jet to go to vacation. Maybe we ground that plane. $15,000 every time it takes off.
Of course, pointing out the hypocrisy doesn't matter because the hypocrisy is the point. The point is they get to break the laws. You have to follow the laws. See, they get to do this because they're on the side of right. They're on a mission from God. I keep telling people this. It's like the Blues Brothers. They're on a mission from God and they can believe they can do no wrong. And to make things worse, everything Trump touches dies. To add insult to the injury there, as the men's hockey team won, they reposted, they quote posted from Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister of Canada, some post he said, you'll never take our sport, something, you'll never take our country, you'll never take our sport, something like that. Probably in reference to, you know, 51st state shenanigans. And so they reposted that with a picture. And the picture is of a bald eagle with a Canada goose in its talons face down on the ice. Like, you know, AI generated slop. Like, can't even be gracious in winning. Have to literally rub their face in it. Can't even enjoy our Olympic athletes winning something without the Trump regime turning it into something disgusting.
You are going to steal drugs from the Mexican cartel.
You look like you're going to a strip club.
That's a perfect size for a sea lion.
Are you going to a strip club?
We know he's the capo of a Mexican cartel.
It will be called Operation Sea Lion.
I don't know if you've seen the videos that have come out recently, the airports in Puerto Vallarta, in Guadalajara, all sorts of cartel violence has erupted there upon the Mexican military taking out one of the leaders of the Jalisco cartel, one of the two big drug trafficking cartels along with Sinaloa. And a lot of this is because of pressure from the Trump regime, because they keep threatening, the Trump regime threatens that, we will actually do our own military strikes on Mexican soil and threaten their sovereignty. And of course, Mexico's a small nation. They can't really afford to go up against us. So President Sheinbaum there, Claudia Sheinbaum, has been trying to show that they can make progress, the Mexican military can make progress against the drug cartels without Trump and the military having to step foot on their soil. And that's what they did. They took out this cartel leader, and they got significant assistance from the United States in the form of intelligence. So this is, in a sense, us doing a proxy war against the cartels down there, fomenting more violence. Americans have been told to shelter in place. People are stranded in hotels that haven't been getting any service, any food brought in. So it's dire straits. Once again, Trump making the world a less safe place, a more dangerous place. This is not to say that the cartels are good by any measure. They are trafficking fentanyl, they're trafficking methamphetamine, they're trafficking human beings, they engage in violence and torture, they corrupt the governments there, both in Mexico and in the United States. Jalisco cartel has membership in all 50 United States, as does Sinaloa. So this isn't something that we're supposed to celebrate, but Claudia Sheinbaum herself, the president of Mexico, has for a long time criticized the United States policy of going after the kingpins. We'll just knock off El Chapo. We'll knock off the next drug lord. And of course, all that does is lead to a violent upheaval of the cartels themselves. It does nothing to, in any long-term sense, disrupt their markets. In the short-term sense, it increases the prices and the violence in the drug markets. Of course, the United States is not ready to look at the long-term solution. Long-term solution is to address the demand for these drugs, the demand for fentanyl and for methamphetamine. Why do people take fentanyl? Because they're in pain. They are in pain, whether it be psychic or physical or a combination of both, for a lack of health care, a lack of mental health care, a lack of opportunities. Why are people taking methamphetamine? Working 2 or 3 jobs to try to get by in this economy? There's all sorts of reasons why. But we don't want to seriously address those reasons with things like universal basic income and Medicare for all and comprehensive mental health care in this country. So we're going to continue to go after the kingpins, and Claudia Sheinbaum's between a rock and a hard place. She knows this won't work. She knows it'll just foment more violence, but maybe it's the lesser of two evils to have a little bit more cartel violence, massive cartel violence going on in your country than to have the United States military setting their feet down on Mexican soil. But as I went over this story, there was one comment I had to particularly highlight for my audience, and this guy got ratioed for it. One of the dumbest senators in the United States Senate, and this is a Senate that includes Tommy Tuberville, so Mike Lee out of Utah posted a picture, and it was a picture from a surveillance cam, and it was some of these cartel guerrillas, militiamen, and they were all masked up in paramilitary gear, staked out at some gas station or something. And Mike Lee, with the self-awareness of a paramecium, typed out in the English language on a public board for all to see, and I quote, "Cartel hitmen wear masks. Leftists aren't complaining." And he was immediately ratioed like, yeah, okay, if we want to be intellectually consistent, let's agree. Both ICE and Mexican cartel hitmen should not wear masks. He was trying to make some point about us complaining about ICE wearing masks. Like, so you are comparing ICE to the Mexican cartel paramilitary hitmen. Okay, thanks, Mike Lee. Some of these Republicans, man, there's a bunch of weird ones. We got some weird ones up here in the Pacific Northwest, too. So you've heard about Lori Chavez DeRemer? I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Okay, so last week I made a joke on the podcast. I was talking about the funny names that they have. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. The funny names that they have in the cabinet, like Christy Lynn Arnold Nome. Klan is literally the head of the Department of Fatherland Security. So Lori Chavez DeRemer is the Secretary of Labor. And my joke was, oh, here's the person who's going to be, screwing people over in jobs, and her name's DeRemer, right? Well, I put that podcast up, and then like the next day or two, word came out. I forgot who reported it. Maybe it was Wall Street Journal. I'm not sure, but word came out that her husband, Mr. DeRemer, has been banned from the building at the Department of Labor. Let me see if I can find the actual post on this. Yes, here we go. New York Times. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer's husband has been barred from entering Labor Department headquarters after 2 female staffers accused him of sexual assault inside the building. According to the New York Times, one alleged incident was captured on security cameras and is now part of a criminal investigation. Look, it was a joke, man. The whole DeRemer thing, I was just making a joke. You didn't have to actually go and do it, dude. And like, you'd think his wife would be shocked, but the other thing coming out about her is out here in the Pacific Northwest is apparently she had, now understand that Lori Chavez DeRemer used to be the Republican representative for the district in Washington State, Southwest Washington, which is Vancouver, Washington, just north of Portland, right? So it's come out now that she had been taking her staff to strip clubs in Portland and kept a supply of liquor in the office. So maybe she's not too shocked. That makes me wonder what strip club they went to in Portland, because there's a lot of them. I'll bet it wasn't the vegan strip club. Yeah, that's right, dear listener. Portland has not 1, but 2 vegan strip clubs. Yes, vegan. Like the only things you can get to eat in the strip club are vegan menu items. And you're thinking, eat in a strip club? Gross. No, that's a regular thing in Portland. In fact, there's one Portland strip club that's very famous for its steaks. It's got a steak going on. I wouldn't eat at the buffet. Anyway, the other thing about the vegan strip club is they don't give you $1 bills. Everything is tipped in $2 bills. So if you're a fan of that whole Jefferson $2 bill, that's the place to go. I can't remember the name of it, though. Been a long time since I lived in Portland. Anyway, speaking of that district, the woman who's representing it now is Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. And I don't know what it is with these Latinas with the hyphenated names in the Pacific Northwest, but Marie Gluesenkamp Perez is nominally a Democrat, but she's one of those Democrats. She's one of the, when we've covered a story where the Democrats could have done it, but like 7 of them balked, or 8 of them balked, or 3 of them balked, right? She's one of them. She's in that Cuellar caucus of Democrats that, don't always vote Democratic. So I came across this post that she had up, and it had to do with sea lions. And she posted, "My provision to explore more cost-effective and efficient ways to remove these Corolla-sized vermin from our rivers and tributaries was just signed into law. I enjoy brainstorming with Southwest Washington fishermen on the next steps to return our runs to their former glory." Corolla-sized vermin. Well, Representative Gluesenkamp Perez, I don't think you have good reasons for demeaning sea lions as Corolla-sized vermin, nor for removing sea lions from their natural habitat. I think you should debate me on this issue of sea lions on the rivers in Washington State. I'm just politely trying to ask you, what do you have against sea lions? The fact that you won't debate me implies that you must have no good reason for wanting to ban these sea lions. And I'm asking you nicely. I can't understand why you wouldn't want to talk to me about sea lions. It seems like a very important issue to you. And as someone who's just a polite podcaster asking about I'm sorry. If you don't get the joke, look up sea lioning on the internet. Sea lioning, like a verb.
Hey, you want to get high, man?
He was trying to desert, but he was so high on marijuana that he tripped and fell into the barbed wire, sir.
Are you stoned?
You want to smoke some weed?
Are you stoned?
I won't go schizo, will I?
It's a distinct possibility.
Well, finally, for our third quick hit here, something that actually fits the topic pretty well. A story coming out of the National Public Radio, NPR, says, headline, a huge study finds a link between cannabis use in teens and psychosis later. Oh, boy. All right, let me tell you something. The whole thing about pot's going to make you schizo, pot's going to make you go crazy, has been a part of reefer madness since the 1930s. So I always approach something like this with a Morton-sized shaker of salt. However, there are some things to be pointed out in this study. This was a study coming out of Kaiser Permanente's health system in Northern California. They examined 460,000 teenagers. They were followed until they were 25. They had annual screenings for substance use and any mental health diagnoses from their health records. They excluded any adolescents who had symptoms of mental illnesses before using cannabis. According to Dr. Lynn Silver, a pediatrician and researcher at the Public Health Institute and author of the new study, she says, quote, we looked at kids using cannabis before they had any evidence of these psychiatric conditions and then followed them to understand if they were more likely or less likely to develop them. What they found was that teens who reported using cannabis in the past year were at a higher risk of being diagnosed with several mental health conditions a few years later compared to teens who did not use cannabis. Teens who reported using cannabis had twice the risk of developing two serious mental illnesses, bipolar and schizophrenia. Now, only a small fraction of the which was nearly 4,000 of the 460,000 teens in the study were diagnosed with each of these two disorders. They are among the most serious and disabling of mental illnesses. Now, this is where let's get something straight here. Okay. Presuming that this is a causal relationship, that teenagers smoking pot leads to them developing psychoses later in life, more likelihood of psychosis later in life. I think this calls for a very strict age limit on the use of cannabis, which is 21 in all the states that have legalized it. Now, this is where I get really frustrated, is because this researcher, Silver, she goes on to say that the treatment for these debilitating illnesses of bipolar and schizophrenia cost $350 billion a year. So any of the money that we're making from cannabis legalization in the form of taxation, etc., is more than offset by the cost of all these people getting schizophrenia and bipolar. And I'm saying, my goodness, what a heck of a leap was just made there. The leap made there was that we legalized marijuana for adults over age 21. Therefore, more kids smoke pot. Therefore, more kids get schizophrenia and bipolar. That costs $350 billion. Therefore, legalizing it for adults wasn't worth it. So we should go back to locking them up? No. So let's just think about this for a little bit. Have the rates of schizophrenia and bipolar been increasing? We've had legalization since 2012. We've had widespread use of cannabis in the United States since the 1970s. And yet, these rates of bipolar and schizophrenia and major psychoses remain hovering below 1%. They haven't had a massive proportional increase to the massive proportional increase of cannabis. Now, you'll hear some people talk about, oh, there's more kids going in for the into the emergency rooms and such. This can happen. You can have psychotic reactions, especially young teenagers. None of that argues for locking up adults. And I still am a little reticent to ascribe any sort of causal relationship to this. They say they teased out the kids that didn't have any signs of mental health disorders before starting their cannabis. Could it be that for many of them, the use of the cannabis stopped them from displaying any of the problems with their mental health disorders? Again, this is so hard to tease out, and you can't really come up with a perfect case-controlled double-blind study on this, because it's unethical to be giving some people this and other people not. So if one thing does come out of this study, and it's to get teenagers to take cannabis a little bit more seriously for the mind-altering substance, that it is, and gets them to forestall their use of cannabis and gives parents something to help them forestall their use of cannabis, perhaps that's a good thing. But again, this has been a reefer madness scare for almost a century now. I advise you to take it with a grain of salt. And on the marijuana tip here for a second, I saw new data coming out from Polling USA showing the support for legalization in the United States of America is at 57%. That's a little concerning to me because it had gotten as high as 70% in the Gallup poll. Could it be that some of the states now that have had legalization for a while, that some people are having some buyer's remorse, being able to smell pot everywhere they go, for example? I don't know. Time will tell, but you know me, I will be fighting till my dying breath with a joint in my hand to preserve the liberty of anyone of adult age to be able to use cannabis.
Our top story tonight.
Our top story tonight.
Top story tonight.
Our top story tonight.
Now the face in the eyes of the champion.
Well, for my top story this week, it's not Donald Trump being smacked down by the Supreme Court 6-3 on his Liberation Day tariffs. It's just, once again, he broke the law. The courts are going to say he broke the law, and he's just going to ignore them and go break the law again. And then they're going to say that's breaking the law, and then he's just going to go break the law again because they said he has immunity for all his official acts in office, and he's got a supine Republican Party that'll never do anything to impeach or rebuke him. So I don't care. The whole tariff thing, it's obviously a joke. It's a tax on the American people. And so now he's raised it to 10% globally. And then, oh no, now it's going to be 15% globally. And he's doing it under the Section 122 that was part of the Supreme Court decision that said he couldn't do that. So again, just ignoring the law. And until we replace the Congress in the 2026 midterms, until we retake the White House in 2028, he's just going to continue breaking the law. So that's not interesting to me. What is interesting to me are backronyms. You know what backronyms are? That's when you take and you make an acronym backwards. You start with what you want the acronym to be, and then you make up the words that fit the acronym. So, in honor of good backronyms, I want to tip my cap to the state of New Jersey, which has proposed the Fight Unlawful Conduct and Keep Individuals and Communities Empowered Act, otherwise known as the Fuck ICE Act. Good job there. Nice backronym. And it's, the typical kind of things, ICE ought to follow the law. ICE ought to obey the Constitution, the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment and the Eighth Amendment and, all those amendments. They ought to behave, like cops, like regular cops that also brutalize people all the time. But I don't want to get too far into that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. I just wanted to congratulate them on the backronym. And, I've got my own backronym that I've been working on for years now since, the first Trump maladministration. And that is the Declaring Our Nation a Lawful Democracy Just to Repudiate Unfit Malicious Presidents Act. That's right, the Donald J. Trump Act. This is something I believe should be taken up in the next administration. Hopefully, President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will take this up. And the Donald J. Trump Act will basically be an omnibus bill to plug all of the holes, all of the norms, all of the understandings of how our government used to work and fit them into a law with teeth. Like presidents can't sue their own government. Who would ever thought of that? What president in the past would have ever thought of suing his own government? So you can't do that. You can't take bribes. I know we've got an emoluments clause, but we'll put some teeth into that. You can't take bribes. Let's curtail the pardon power. I've seen something floating around giving Congress the ability, if more than 10 House members and 5 senators agree to look at it. I may have those numbers not exactly precise, but a certain number of congressmen and senators say that pardon's questionable, then it can be brought up before the entire Congress, which then would have to vote by 2/3 to reject that pardon, which, I don't know. I'm so tired of these 2/3 majorities you have to get for like passing amendments and 60% majorities to get things through the Senate. How about we just go to having, majorities run things? But nevertheless, that's something that needs to be put in the Donald J. Trump Act. Presidential candidates have to supply their tax returns. Something that was just a norm until Trump said, no, I'm not going to do it. Presidents have to have independent medical and mental evaluations that are made public. Independent, right? No Dr. Ronnie Jackson saying you're 6'3", 215. Come on now. Like Ali in his prime. But just think of everything that Trump has done and shown to be a weakness in our system. Let's make the Donald J. Trump Act, put all this stuff together into one big, beautiful bill to steal some nomenclature there. Get that passed in the next administration. It's about time we had some updates to this 250-year-old constitutional order, and maybe the silver lining that we can get out of this Trump regime is him exposing all the cracks and the rot in the foundation that need to be taken out and replaced for the 21st century. About time. And one more backronym I want to get to. This one, local, so of interest to me, and I'm sure will be of interest nationwide if it is to make the ballot. It's the Peace Act here in Oregon, PEACE. And it's an initiated petition, IP28, that they're trying to get on the ballot. And they've gotten some close to 100,000 signatures, and they need a few more to get this on the ballot in the state of Oregon. And it stands for the People for the Elimination of Animal Cruelty Exceptions Act. Now, on its face, that sounds like a good thing. Don't want to be cruel to animals, right? But basically what they're trying to do here is to remove the exemptions from Oregon's animal cruelty laws against animal abuse, animal neglect, and animal sexual assault. These statutes prohibit the intentional injury or killing of an animal, the withholding or care from an animal, or the injurious tethering of an animal, and the sexual contact of an animal's mouth, anus, or genitals. Okay, and you're thinking, well, yeah, people shouldn't be molesting the animals, and people shouldn't be intentionally injuring and killing and abusing and neglecting them. That sounds like something you'd want to put your signature on. But what this is basically doing is it's taking all the laws that currently apply to dogs and cats, your domestic pets, and applies them to cattle and fish and deer and ducks and all sorts of things. And basically the effect of this Peace Act in the state of Oregon, if it were to make the ballot and pass, there'd be no more hunting. There'd be no more fishing. There'd be no more rodeo. There'd be no more ranching. Now, it wouldn't specifically say that eating meat would be illegal, but nobody in the state of Oregon could process it, right? Nobody could. And no more animal husbandry, no more breeding, right? That's the sexual assault they're talking about. So no more fish hatcheries. You can't breed fish, right? Now, they would have exemptions for veterinary things, so you could still spay and neuter your pets. That would still be allowed. But basically everything else would be eliminated. Now you can look this up for yourself. It's on the web at yesonip28.org. And look, I got to give it to them on this account. They're consistent and they believe in something. They have a principle here. And their principle is that animals have the right to bodily sovereignty. And they shouldn't, and this would, prevent, caging them and zoos, right? Like we're talking the full on PETA wet dream here. Animals would have complete liberation, complete freedom. So I have to applaud them for having a principle and for standing for it and believing in it and using the democratic process to try to convince people to come to their side. That being said, I don't see it making the ballot. And if it does make the ballot, I can't see anything that would greater accelerate the Greater Idaho movement. That's the secessionist movement of the southern and eastern Oregon counties. that want to leave the state of Oregon and join the state of Idaho, which, to be fair, they are much more politically aligned and geographically aligned with east of the Cascades. It's much more high desert, ranching, farming, heavy Trump country, red conservative religious country out there. I understand their point. You want to nudge them that way? Get this on the ballot and pass it, especially since most of the votes for it would be coming from like Portland and Salem and Eugene, the big liberal metro areas of the state of Oregon. Nothing could highlight the divide in this state greater than if this Peace Act were to make the ballot and to pass. As for me, I agree with some of that stuff. I agree that a lot of the ways that we are farming and ranching are unnecessarily cruel. But this idea that we're not going to have fish hatcheries and cattle breedings and stuff, I don't know, man. That's going a little far. I'm not against the banning of the rodeos. I think banning of the rodeos isn't necessarily a bad thing because, they actually said the rodeos wouldn't be banned. The rodeos would be okay if you could run a rodeo in such a way that you weren't being cruel to an animal. Okay, sure. Is having a steer run out and then you grab it with a rope and yank it in the air, is that cruel? Is tying up the nuts of a bucking bronco to make it buck, or a bull to make it buck, tying up their nuts so that they're uncomfortable, is that the sexual assault they speak of? I think it is, and then that would be banned. So rodeo would be impossible. Maybe barrel racing would still be okay. Maybe, I guess. But I can see this would eliminate horse track racing, dog track racing, and not to say that those should still exist, but boy, this Peace Act goes a long, long way in one big jump. And I don't know that Oregonians or anyone in the United States is really ready for that yet. We've got such a culture of hunting and fishing. I don't know how you would make this thing a reality. We shall see. I'll keep you posted on what happens with IP28. That's yesonip28.org if you'd like to know more.
Hey, kid, what's your name?
I can't remember.
Where you from?
I can't remember.
Can't you remember anything?
I remember the Alamo.
As I was speaking of in the last segment, it is imperative that we retake the Congress in 2026 and the White House in 2028. In order for that to happen, we need to understand how we managed to have a Democratic Party that could lose to Donald Trump twice. How is that even possible? Now, it's easy to look at the misogyny and the misogynoir in the case of Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. I always like to put it that Donald Trump is the only U.S. president to have never won an election against a man. I know that gets under Trump's skin, so that's the way I like to say it. And I'm not going to discount that sexism might have had, or probably had, an impact on Hillary Clinton's campaign and on Kamala Harris's campaign. That being said, I think there's also a lot to be said about the tendency of Democrats, these corporate centrist poll-tested Democrats, to keep reaching across the aisle, keep pandering for that mythical middle moderate Republican voter. That if we can just sound Republican enough, we might be able to get some of them to come over to our side. So with that in mind, taking a look back at Kamala Harris's campaign, there's a report out now from Axios. And I'm just quoting Raheem Kurwa here on Blue Sky. Top Democratic officials who worked on the party's still secret autopsy of the 2024 election concluded that Kamala Harris lost significant support because of the Biden administration's approach to the war on Gaza. Hamid Bendas of the IMEU Policy Project said that during the meeting, quote, the DNC shared with us that their own data also found that policy was, in their words, a net negative in the 2024 election, end quote. I would presume net negative means that you lost more voters from your base than you attracted from the Republican side. And Gee, why is that hard to figure out? If you wanted someone who is on Bibi Netanyahu's side, who would allow Israel to unleash full shock and awe in Gaza, to ethnically cleanse that population and wipe it out to rubble, you already had that candidate in Donald Trump. So yeah, you're not going to get any more people. People that want to vote for Republican will vote for the real Republican, not the Republican light. And then you turn off your Democratic base. Continuing from Rahim Kurwa, 2 other aides at the pro-Palestinian organization also said the DNC had drawn that conclusion. Flashback. Harris said in her book that President Biden's unpopularity, which she argued was partly because of, quote, his perceived blank check, end quote, to Netanyahu, harmed her in 2024. Harris wrote that she privately pleaded with Biden to show more empathy for civilians in Gaza, but during her campaign, she declined to publicly break with him over Israel. And folks, right there in a nutshell is what's wrong with the Democratic Party. She knew it was harming her. She did not believe it herself. She knew there had to be more empathy for the civilians in Gaza. She knew it was wrong to provide material support for a genocide. But she couldn't go against the status quo. She couldn't go against the norm. She couldn't buck the party. She couldn't be seen to be disloyal. Instead of believing in something. Can you imagine if Kamala Harris had separated herself, if on The View, when she was asked that fateful question, would you do anything different from Biden, if she had said, yes, I think that our support for Bibi Netanyahu has turned out to be a mistake. And when I am elected president, I will hold Israel to account, etc., etc. Can you imagine the difference, the excitement that might have sparked among the base? That's the crux of the issue with the Democratic Party. And for me, that's where Kamala Harris failed as a leader. If you're going to be a leader, you got to believe in something and you got to stand for it when it's unpopular and difficult to do so. I don't understand what she thought she was preserving by standing by Biden's side over Gaza. What, you were going to make it tough on the lame duck who wasn't running for re-election? Who was so unpopular at the time and so perceived to be out of touch and asleep at the wheel. You wanted to protect that out of some sense of loyalty, I suppose. But let's have loyalty to the country. Let's have loyalty to the American people. You kept saying Kamala Harris for the people. It seems like it was Kamala Harris for the person, Joe Biden. And hey, full disclosure, I was white dudes for Harris, man. I was fully on board with the Harris campaign. I was openly pushing for Harris to be the president. Because I live in America and one of 2 candidates will be president, the Republican or the Democrat. But we've got to learn from this, and let's hope this word of this autopsy and this understanding starts to get out there and we start to have Democrats that will believe in something. And to that extent, I want to talk a little bit about this race between James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett. So, Jasmine, it's stunning to me, in a sense, that James Tallarico is jumping straight from Texas State Senate to United States Senate. Whereas Jasmine Crockett has come up through the ranks and made her way to the U.S. Congress and is now running for state Senate. And I'm glad we got a primary between these 2 candidates. And you'll know what happened, this last week, of course, was Tallarico was supposed to appear on the Colbert Show. And then Paramount, having no understanding of the Streisand effect, banned Tallarico from being on the show because blah, blah, Brendan Carr, blah, blah, FCC, blah, blah, equal time. It's a bullshit excuse. The real reason was James Tallarico is a Christian Democrat. He is a Democrat and he is a Christian and he's a Presbyterian evangelist. I don't know what title he has. Seminarian, that was it. He's a seminarian, I guess. So anyway, he's always talking about Jesus, and bless him for that. Wonderful. I actually prefer the Christians who behave as Christians, who talk about Jesus, the guy who was all for, helping the poor and the sick and the stranger and the prisoner and the weak and the meek. And I like that Jesus. That's a good Jesus. I'm all for that guy. But I do have a problem with him in my government. Like, I don't want my congressmen and my senators and my presidents to be preaching. It's okay that it's a part of their life and their belief system. But this idea that a James Tallarico is going to go in front of all these evangelicals who have voted for Donald Trump 3 times and convince them that their idea of Jesus is wrong, and if they could only just hear the right words about Jesus, they'd understand and they'd be good Christians now and vote Democratic. It's not going to happen. They are not Christians. They are Christian nationalists. Now, Tallarico's good on that, and he explains how they are Christian nationalists, and it has nothing to do with Christianity. I just don't know who the audience for that is. Us secular people know that. We know what the Christian nationalists are. We know they have nothing to do with the teachings of Christ. And Democrats who are Christians, I think, already know that too. So your only possible audience could be trying to convince some of them who've lost their way and are worshiping the golden calf to come over to your side. I don't like it. And again, I don't think the answer to right-wing religion in our government is left-wing religion in our government. I don't want any religion in our government. Now, of course, Tallarico ended up being broadcast on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and all sorts of places. Ended up getting like 10, 20 times the views he would have gotten if they'd have just kept it on CBS, where most people, getting 2 million views a night, maybe. Then I got to thinking, I wonder if that was on purpose. I wonder if that was on purpose. Thinking through here, let's go conspiracy theory on this, right? Because the very next night or 2 nights later, I can't remember exactly, but Jon Ossoff was on the Colbert Show. Now, Jon Ossoff is the senator from Georgia who is in a re-election campaign right now. So if the argument was Tallarico can't be on because there's some sort of fair use or equal time rule that said that, you have to have Crockett on, which itself was BS because Crockett's already been on a couple times. But if there was a fair use, why is Jon Ossoff allowed on, but not James Tallarico? Well, because I think, and the first theory was like, well, because James Tallarico is he's going to convince the Christians that that Christian nationalism is bad. No, that's the smokescreen. The conspiracy theory is that they want to give Tallarico more exposure so that he becomes the nominee in Texas to go against Paxton. And then Paxton can beat him because Tallarico won't drive the turnout like Crockett would. That maybe they sandbagged the Tallarico interview on Colbert, knowing it would give him more exposure, knowing it would give him more donations to raise him up in the standings so he could beat Crockett, who has lately been tearing things up. And there's also this the theorizing. Democrats do this thing where they try to think about who someone else would vote for rather who than they want to vote for. Right? Like, well, I really like Jasmine Crockett, but Texas is a white boy Republican racist state. She couldn't win statewide. Well, why not? Barack Obama couldn't win until he did. Ann Richards was governor of that state in the 90s. Women can win there. In my mind, this has to do more with Democrats voting for who they believe in and for the people running as Democrats to be someone you can believe in. To stand up for something, to have principle, and to reach out to the Democratic base, like Republicans reach out to their base. And I think Jasmine Crockett has the right idea in that regard.
This is about going after our base that has not been excited, that has not been engaged, and that doesn't mean that we But every single cycle, they tell us, well, how you gonna go get the Republicans? You probably need to sound more like a Republican. That's what they tell us. And what happens with our base? Our base gets turned off because we sound like a Republican.
That is exactly the way. Turn out the base. In every election, except for Joe Biden's election in 2020, did not vote beat the Republican or the Democrat. That's right. If you look at the total number of registered voters, everyone who could have possibly voted, the number of people who don't vote exceeds the winner of the presidential election in every election except for Joe Biden's. Even going back, Barack Obama's popularity, Bill Clinton's popularity, they still did not vote. You got to get people excited for something. They got to believe in something. They got to believe their vote is going to mean something meaningful to them. And for too long in this country, we've been hijacked by billionaires and corporations who have rewritten the rules in their favor to our detriment. I've told you about the study that shows that what the people want, we get about 30% of what we want, regardless if we really want it or we really don't want it. This survey showed that our opinion has zero effect on whether Congress will do something. But the opinions of the 1% have a great correlative effect. If they want something to happen, it will happen. If they don't want something to happen, it will not. And that needs to change. That needs to come undone by undoing Citizens United. That needs to come undone by empowering the people, protecting labor, raising the minimum wage, creating paid parental leave, creating the kind of social safety net where you can strike, where you can quit an abusive employer, where we can gather together and fight for our rights against these corporations, against these owners, against these oligarchs. When we look back at the two big wins in our lifetime, Barack Obama, we gave him a plus 7% popular vote majority, gave him a big majority in the House and a big majority in the Senate. Why did that happen? Why did we have that big blue wave? Well, part of it was George W. Bush absolutely screwing everything up, lying us into war, getting 4,000 Americans killed, torching people at Abu Ghraib, letting people drown during Katrina, having the whole banking crisis that upended the world's economy. He trashed things so badly. But remember that the next person coming up was Hillary Clinton. She was supposed to be the anointed Democrat. How did she lose? Because she kept offering more of the same, an extension of what Clinton brought us, which was a Democratic Party that also wanted to serve business and money instead of a party of the people. And she was undone by Barack Obama, a generational talent when it comes to oratory and charisma, but also because during his campaign, he offered change. That was his whole thing, hope and change. We're going to change from what we've been doing. We can have hope for the future. Now, he didn't necessarily govern that way. I was disappointed by his administration in a number of ways, but the way he campaigned was impeccable. It's exactly how Democrats should reach out. Yes, we can. Si se puede. Remember those days. I had the Obama beanie. I was a blogger at the DNC in Denver for his inauguration. My gosh, we're electing a black man president. We're overcoming racism. Yeah. There was a lot of hope for change back then, I got to tell you. And Clinton didn't really win by big majorities. Both of his wins were aided by Ross Perot siphoning off a lot of votes. So when did Democrats really hold power? You go back to FDR, the most socialist president we ever had. The one who gave the most to the people as far as establishing all the things we take for granted, like Social Security and our labor laws, the New Deal. That's the kind of democracy we're looking for. That's the kind of democratic leadership. He was so successful in helping the American people, he won 4 consecutive elections. They had to come up with the 22nd Amendment just to stop that from ever happening again. The Democrats held the House for 40 years. Now, we could be on the verge of that kind of change. We could be on the verge of that sort of revolution if young, ambitious leadership in the Democratic Party is allowed to thrive. And I don't think it's the direction of James Tallarico and the Democrats that want to try to reconcile and heal and move forward and get beyond and reach across the aisle. No, it's time for the Democratic base to rise up. It's time for the left, the secular left, to stand up for the multicultural democracy this country can be and should be, and not want to heal, but to vanquish the other side. Let me give you another Democratic politician people are talking about, just as an example. And that is the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, was on the Sunday shows the other day, and the discussion was about Donald Trump and his combative style and how Governor Gavin Newsom goes and fights back, and there seems to be these two camps in the Democratic coalition, is whether or not we should be fighters or we should be cooperators. And Beshear seems to come across as one of the cooperators.
But if somebody is looking for a Democratic version of Trump, that's not me. You know, my goal is to bring people together. My goal is to heal the country. And you can't do that if you're engaged in the same tactics that he is. And if that's what the American people are looking for, I'm not their guy.
What is it with some of these Democrats where Republicans come out and harm the country, and then you want to bring them together? You want to heal with them. Like they're the cause of the problem. I don't want to be brought together with them. I want to give them free health care. I want to give them better labor protections. I want to give them parental leave. I want to give them security in their old age. But I don't want to have them have any sort of power over dictating our life ever again. I don't want to bring them in for their opinions on how to do things after they voted for Donald Trump 3 times. I don't want them. It's time for us to vanquish the Confederacy once and for all. This has been the problem throughout American history, is that we've never recognized that there are a certain percentage of people in America who want fascism, who want racism, who want misogyny, who want homophobia, who want Christian nationalism, and we cannot coexist with them. It is not a paradox of tolerance. You must be intolerant of intolerance to be tolerant. They cancel each other out. It's a double negative. Intolerance of intolerance is tolerance. So no, I'm sorry, Andy Beshear, you've kind of fallen off my radar as far as any of the 2028 presidential contenders, because I don't want to reconcile with these people. I don't want to heal with these people. Let me give you an example of one of these people. You may have heard of Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is, well, what used to be considered a far-right fringe neo-Nazi, but now kind of mainstream Republican. He's dined with President Trump, after all. He's had dinner with the president. He's incited in many right-wing spheres. This is the kind of guy Andy Beshear thinks we ought to try to bring together. Some of the people that we ought to bring together with us. Give this a listen.
Women are made to be fucked, literally. That's what it is. They're made to be bred. They're made to have kids with. Okay, they exist for sex. Women are either mothers, whores, or nuns. No other options.
Katherine Johnson.
There are no female philosophers.
Mary Wollstonecraft.
There are no female inventors.
Eddie Lamar.
There are no female generals.
General Ann Dunwoody.
Or billionaires.
Oprah Winfrey.
They are mothers, whores, nuns. End of list.
Marie Curie.
That's what you can be.
Grace Hopper.
Women are made to be fucked, literally.
Not that this incel living in his mom's basement would have any firsthand knowledge of such a thing. My God, but folks, this Nick Fuentes guy, millions of young men are listening to this guy. This is the young male support that Donald Trump relied on to win in 2024. And these are the kind of podcasters, these brocasters out there spewing this misogynistic filth. And I don't want to reconcile with them. I don't want to heal them. I don't want to bring them in. I want to defeat them. I want to defeat them and their ideology. I want them to slink back to the dark recesses of the interwebs on their little 4chan boards and leave the rest of us alone and let us develop our multicultural Star Trek utopia society that we can achieve in this nation if we just get beyond these petty hatreds and jealousies and start to work together with people who will work together with us. The ones who will not, we just need to defeat them.
Or you want somebody to train your death squads.
They've revealed that police are running death squads.
You're the first of the official death squads to whom we've been formally introduced.
Torture, paid informants, roadside executions, death squads.
You have seen the poverty, the injustice, the death squads.
As you may know, we are kind of in the middle of a government shutdown, but not all of the government. The most recent shutdown has to do just with the funding over DHS, which the Democrats were able to separate out from the rest of the government funding bill, which right there gave away some of their leverage, because had the entire government been going unfunded, it might have created a little more pressure to get the Trump regime to agree to some of these demands regarding ICE, which I will also get to in a moment. But they gave that leverage away and made it to be just about DHS, which is also kind of lacking in leverage because ICE and Customs and Border Patrol are already funded from that big, beautiful bill they passed. They've already got some $75 billion to work with. So no ICE agents are going to go without pay. No operations are going to go unfunded. They're going to continue to terrorize the American people as they have been doing. So what wouldn't get funded? Well, DHS they were looking at maybe cutting back on the pre-check and the global entry, which I guess they've backed off now because that would affect rich white people. But, other things like FEMA and Coast Guard are being affected. So this led to a Sunday news show, the Fox News show, having Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries on the program, who once again continues to fail to meet the moment. And this is something I actually got addressed this online with some other folks. And this one poster was complaining about Hakeem Jeffries' speaking manner, and he just comes off as insincere when he has his hand gestures that he must put in before we make sure to pivot to the talking point that my donors have made sure that I would be sure to enforce. I mean, so I made a note of that, and then someone else called me out on that, saying, oh, that's all you can care about is the way he talks. No, that's part of it, because it's just a indication of his insincerity and the fact that he is bankrolled by some of the worst donors in the donor class. Hakeem Jeffries' top donor for the 2023-24 cycle was AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the pro-Israel PAC, to the tune of $866,000. And not only was that his biggest donor, but by a wide margin, his next biggest donor didn't even give 1/11th the amount that AIPAC gave to Hakeem Jeffries. His next biggest donor, oh, here's a good one, Blackrock. Yeah, Blackrock, the international mercenary organization, the Erik Prince group. He got $74,000 from them. Apollo Global Management, I'm sure some sort of fund, hedge fund kind of thing, $70,000 from them. MetLife, big insurer, $68,000, and Lockheed Martin, the big defense contractor, $63,000. Golly, seems like Hakeem Jeffries has all sorts of reasons for not wanting to abolish ICE, for not wanting to ratchet down what's going on in Gaza. Why there wasn't a whole lot of pressure on the Biden administration to do the right thing. But he went on the Sunday shows, and the host there on Fox was holding his feet to the fire pretty well on this, pointing out that the shutdown we're currently engaged in isn't going to hurt ICE at all.
Why take away funding from FEMA, from TSA, the Coast Guard, and others when ICE is fully funded?
Why not reopen the government?
Well, let's remember, Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. To the extent there is ever a shutdown, as was the case with the 43-day Trump-Republican shutdown in the fall.
They cannot move forward out of a shutdown without Democrat votes. They can't do it. You guys have got to vote with them.
So there you go. Jeffries right into that. Oh, let's make sure we get the talking point out that it's not our fault. We're not shutting anything down. That was an old talking point from 2 shutdowns ago, man. And no one buys that anymore. She shut that down pretty quick. That like, no, let's take some ownership for what we were doing, Hakeem. We are shutting the government down. Like, you want to deflect this. Oh no, it's the Republicans' fault because no, it's our fault. We, the Democrats, are shutting the government down because of what ICE is doing. Be direct, stand for something, for God's sake.
Our basic value proposition is that taxpayer dollars should be used to make life more affordable for the American people, not to brutalize or kill them, as was done with an ICU
you're not going to shut down
nurse,
ICE
Alex Preddy.
As part of this shutdown. And those are tragic cases that are being investigated and must be. We need answers on that. But
had to make sure to get the affordability plank in there. We saw that in a poll. People really care about affordability. Make sure we say we're all about affordability. That's the word now, affordability. And then the anchor there, again, forcefully shutting down the fact that, like, okay, you're against ICE being brutal. You're against ICE abusing people, but this doesn't shut down ICE. They've got $75 billion to work with. So what are we doing? Are we standing up, shutting down the FEMA and the Coast Guard because we're trying to get ICE to change their ways? Stand up for that, Hakeem.
We believe that this moment should be used to make dramatic changes to ICE that are bold, that are transformational, and that are meaningful.
Yeah, bold, transformational, and meaningful changes to ICE. What sort of bold changes should we have ICE engage in?
That include lifting up the Fourth Amendment and ensuring that judicial warrants are actually required before ICE agents can break into the homes of the American people.
Oh, okay. So once they do have those warrants, ICE should be free to just break into people's homes. ICE should, what ICE should do? They should actually follow the Constitution and the law as it's already written. Boy, what a bold ask. What a bold ask. Wouldn't you just please follow the law? Wouldn't you obey the Constitution? And I think what he doesn't understand here is that ICE is an acronym. And what it stands for is poorly trained paramilitary ethnic cleansing death squads recruited with Nazi propaganda. Think that every time you hear them say something about ICE. We should have the poorly trained paramilitary ethnic cleansing death squads recruited with Nazi propaganda have to get judicial warrants before they break down people's doors. We ought to have the poorly trained paramilitary ethnic cleansing death squads recruited with Nazi propaganda have respect for the Fourth Amendment. What else should the poorly trained paramilitary ethnic cleansing death squads recruited with Nazi propaganda be doing, Leader Jeffries?
We believe there should be independent investigations so that if ICE breaks the law, state and local authorities can investigate and prosecute them, as is the case with every other law enforcement agency in the country.
As is the case with every other law enforcement agency. Well, first of all, let's understand that what ICE is enforcing is a civil matter. Like enforcing hunting licenses and fishing licenses, and this is a matter of paperwork. I really detest them lumping all law enforcement together as if the guys that are out there investigating, child rapes, murders, kidnappings, organized theft rings are somehow in the same category as the poorly trained paramilitary ethnic cleansing death squads recruited with Nazi propaganda. So, yeah, the other thing about this is that Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries can't get to abolish ICE. They can't get there. Because what ICE is doing right now differs very little from what police departments do in America every day to black and brown people. This is only new because it's getting the attention of white people. It's only new because they went and attacked Minnesota. They went and killed 2 white folks. But this type of policing, make sure you get a warrant before you break down people's doors and shoot their dogs and terrorize their kids, has been going on for decades. I've said it many times on this podcast. There's not a single story coming out now about ICE that I haven't already told over the past 20 years of the drug war.
We believe that sensitive locations like houses of worship, like hospitals, like schools, and like polling sites should be protected.
Yes, okay, let's keep the poorly trained paramilitary ethnic cleansing death squads recruited with Nazi propaganda away from our polling sites, our churches, and our schools. You know, like regular cops. Hakeem Jeffries is not suited to be our leader, and anyone running for office right now for 2026 could do their campaign a huge favor by openly committing to not support Hakeem Jeffries as leader, as Kat Abu Ghazali has already done. I saw a video she had out where they had some candidate debate, and there's 3 of them on stage. They had a lightning round where they had to hold up yes or no, signs. And they were asked, would you support Hakeem Jeffries? And boom, no. And her hand as far up as it could go. I want to see more of that from these Democrats to understand that AIPAC Shakur here, Hakeem Jeffries, anybody taking massive donations from AIPAC ought to be suspect right off the get-go. And no, this is not anti-Semitic. This is anti-right-wing Israeli. Don't even try that shit with me. And that's the end of this joint, my friends. The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons Share-alike licensing. News, music, video clips, and social media posts are reproduced under fair use copyright laws for commentary and analysis. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by Russ Boom Boom Belville.
What's the boom boom for?
Boom, boom, boom.
Which brings us to our post-credits scene.
Not this again, huh?
I think I've got a gimmick.
More or less, except for the end, I got a gimmick that's real good.
I saw that the Utah Supreme Court has upheld the restoration of fair voting maps for the 2026 midterms. And yet another defeat in the redistricting wars for the GOP. They started it with Texas. Trump said, I got to get 5 more seats. And so Texas was quick to bend the knee and, yeah, we'll redistrict. We'll give you 5 more seats. California responded, oh, let's see your 5 seats and raise you 5 of our own. So we'll nullify what Texas did. And then Indiana and Kansas started seeing the results of some of these special elections where these formerly safe Republican plus single-digit districts were losing to Democrats in plus double digits and said, yeah, maybe we won't redistrict some of our plus double-digit Trump districts into single-digit districts. Maybe that's not a good idea for the forthcoming election. And then Virginia is saying it might go plus 4D on this redistricting of their own. I know Maryland and Delaware are looking at it, although I think Maryland's being held up by their state senator. So, and they lost Utah. They can't get the redistricting in Utah. So after all this shakes out, it might end up being a net bonus for the Democratic Party in the redistricting wars. Ha ha ha. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com. Call my message line at 877-RUSS-420. That's 877-877-420. And reach me on social media on Blue Sky as radicalruss.com and nowhere else. You can support this podcast financially by donating to Radical Russ on Venmo, Rad Russ on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next week, take care of each other. Oh, and a quick shout out to Elijah, who I saw at the grocery store the other day. A little boy who I first met, I think when he was about 5. I can't even remember how old he was. Maybe he was 5 years old. He remembered me when he was 5 years old. Now he's a towering young man. The cannabis community grows up.